They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I never understood that saying until 3 months ago. Now I know it means you wait. You plan. You let the fury crystallize into something pure and sharp, something that cuts deeper than any heated outburst ever could. My name is David Chen, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones capable of the deepest betrayals, and how I made sure they'd never forget it. 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I was 25, working as a software engineer at a promising startup in Austin, making decent money, and living in a beautiful house with my girlfriend of 3 years, Sarah, and my best friend since college, Marcus. We had this perfect little setup. I handled the mortgage, Marcus covered utilities, and Sarah contributed what she could while finishing her master's in psychology. Sarah Martinez was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Petite, with long dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold secrets, she had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when she talked to you. She was ambitious, funny, and had this infectious laugh that could lift my spirits after the most brutal coding sessions. We'd met during our senior year of college, and I'd been smitten from day one. Marcus Thompson was my rock. 6'2", built like he still played college football, which he had, with an easy smile and the kind of charisma that made everyone want to be around him. He was working in sales for a tech company, crushing his quotas, and always ready with a beer and advice when I needed it. We'd been roommates since sophomore year, and even after graduation, it just made sense to stick together. The three of us had this easy dynamic. Friday night movie marathons, weekend barbecues, double dates with Marcus's rotating cast of girlfriends. Sarah would joke that she had 2 boyfriends, and Marcus would laugh and say he was just keeping her warm for me. It was comfortable. It was home. I should have known it was too good to be true. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday in March. I'd come home early from work, our lead developer had called in sick, and we'd pushed our sprint review to the following day. I walked into the house expecting to find Sarah at the kitchen table, surrounded by her textbooks and research papers like usual. Instead, I found an empty house and her car in the driveway. "Sarah," I called out, dropping my laptop bag by the door. No answer. I checked the backyard, thinking maybe she was reading on the deck. Nothing. Her phone was on the counter, which was odd. Sarah was practically attached to that thing. I figured she'd gone for a walk or was at the neighbor's, so I grabbed a beer and settled in to catch up on some personal coding projects. She came back about an hour later, slightly breathless, her hair messed up in a way that suggested she'd been running her hands through it. "Oh, you're home early," she said, and there was something in her voice I couldn't quite place. Surprise. Guilt. I was just taking a walk. Lost track of time. "Without your phone." I gestured to the counter. She laughed, but it sounded forced. "You know me, always forgetting something. How was your day?" The subject change felt abrupt, but I let it slide. Sarah had always been a little scatterbrained when she was stressed about school. I figured her thesis was getting to her. I wish I could say that was the moment I knew something was wrong, but the truth is, I trusted her completely. When you love someone, you make excuses for the little things that don't add up. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You assume the best. That's what made what came next so much worse. Over the next few weeks, the small inconsistencies started piling up. Sarah would disappear for hours at a time, always with explanations that made sense in isolation but felt odd when I looked at the pattern. Research at the library, but she'd come home without any new books. Study group meetings that none of her classmates I knew were part of. Long runs in the park, despite the fact that she'd never been much of a runner. Marcus, meanwhile, seemed to be having the time of his life. He was getting promoted at work, his commissions were through the roof, and he had this new energy about him. He'd always been confident, but lately, he seemed almost smug. Like he was in on some joke the rest of us weren't getting. "You seem happy," I said one evening as we grabbed beers from the fridge. Sarah was at another study group. "Just killing it at work, man," he said, popping open his bottle with more force than necessary. "Life's good. Really good. Any new prospects on the dating front?" He paused, just for a second, but long enough that I noticed. "Nah, just keeping things casual." You know how it is. But I didn't know how it was. Marcus had never been shy about bringing dates around, never coy about his conquests. For the past few weeks, though, his social life had become mysteriously private. The real turning point came on a Friday night in early April. Sarah had begged off our usual movie night, claiming she had a major paper due Monday and needed to spend the weekend at the library. Marcus had plans with work friends. So I found myself home alone, which was fine. I had a new video game I'd been wanting to try, and the house to myself meant I could play with the sound as loud as I wanted. I was about 3 hours deep into an epic boss battle when I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Expecting Sarah home early from her study session, I saved my progress and went to greet her. But when I looked out the front window, I didn't see her car. Instead, Marcus was walking up to the front door, alone. "Thought you were out with the work crew," I said when he came in. "Plans fell through," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Tony's kid got sick, so we called it early." Something about his demeanor felt off. He seemed nervous, fidgety in a way that wasn't like him at all. His shirt was wrinkled, and there was a smudge of what looked like lipstick on his collar. "Looks like someone had a good time anyway," I said, nodding toward the stain. His hand flew to his neck, and for just a moment I saw panic in his eyes. Then his easy smile was back. "Oh, that. Yeah, ran into this girl I used to know. Just a friendly hello, you know how it is." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. But that little voice in the back of my head, the one I'd been ignoring for weeks, was getting louder. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Sarah slept beside me. She'd come home around midnight, full of apologies about losing track of time at the library. She smelled like soap, like she'd scrubbed herself clean before coming to bed. When I tried to pull her close, she claimed exhaustion and turned away. I found myself mentally cataloging all the little things that had been bothering me. The way she'd started spending more time on her appearance, even for study sessions. The new perfume she'd started wearing, something expensive that I hadn't bought her. The way she and Marcus had stopped making eye contact during our group conversations. The way they both seemed to have convenient excuses whenever I suggested we all hang out together. By morning, I'd made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find out what was really going on. I want to be clear about something. I'm not proud of what I did next. Spying on the people you love goes against every instinct of trust and respect that healthy relationships are built on. But I was drowning in doubt, and I needed to know the truth, one way or another. I started small. I began paying closer attention to patterns, timing, behaviors. I noted when Sarah left and when she returned, cross-referencing with Marcus's schedule. I started checking the mileage on her car, comparing it to the distances she claimed to be traveling. I looked through phone bills, though both of them were careful about their texting. Or maybe they were using apps that didn't show up on our shared plan. The breakthrough came when I realized I'd been thinking about this all wrong. I'd been focused on catching them in lies about where they were going, but the real evidence was probably in where they'd been. Our house had a security system. Basic cameras at the front and back doors that fed to an app on my phone. I'd installed them the previous year after a string of break-ins in our neighborhood, but I rarely checked the footage unless there was a specific incident. That afternoon, while Sarah was at what she claimed was a group presentation practice and Marcus was supposedly showing properties to clients, I sat down with my laptop and started going through the archived footage. What I found made my stomach drop. The timestamp read 2:17 p.m., 3 days prior, the day I'd come home early to an empty house with Sarah's car in the driveway. I watched my own car pull out of the driveway at 8:43 a.m. At 11:15, Marcus's truck pulled in. At 11:23, Sarah appeared at the front door, letting him in. There was something in their body language, the way they moved around each other, that made my chest tight. I fast-forwarded. At 1:45 p.m., they both appeared in the front doorway. Marcus left first, jogging to his truck like he was in a hurry. Sarah waited about 5 minutes, then came back out, got in her car, and drove away. She returned at 3:20, about 10 minutes before I got home. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through more footage. The pattern was there, clear as day, once I knew what to look for. Days when both of them claimed to be elsewhere, but the cameras showed Marcus's truck in our driveway. Times when Sarah would leave shortly after I did, only to return just before my usual arrival time, with Marcus having visited in between. I felt sick. Physically, nauseously sick. But I also felt something else. A cold, calculating anger that surprised me with its intensity. They thought they were so clever. They thought I was too trusting, too naive to figure it out. They were probably laughing about it, about how easy it was to fool poor, clueless David. That's when I decided they deserved everything that was coming to them. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. The security cameras had given me proof that something was happening, but they only covered the entrances. I needed more. I needed everything. I spent the next week researching. There are a surprising number of tiny, high-definition cameras available online, designed for home security, nanny monitoring, and other legitimate purposes. Some were so small they could be hidden in everyday objects, alarm clocks, picture frames, even fake plants. The technology was incredible and terrifying. I settled on a set of 4 wireless cameras, each about the size of a quarter, with week-long battery life and motion activation. They connected to a cloud storage system that I could access from anywhere. The whole setup cost me about $800. Expensive, but worth every penny for what I was planning. The hardest part was the installation. I had to be strategic about placement and timing. I couldn't just scatter them randomly around the house. They needed to be positioned to capture the areas where I suspected the worst was happening, while remaining completely invisible. I called in sick on a Thursday when I knew Sarah had back-to-back classes all morning and Marcus had a big client presentation. I spent 4 hours carefully positioning the cameras. One in the living room, hidden in the decorative bowl on the coffee table that Sarah had insisted on buying. One in our bedroom, tucked behind the frame of a photo of the 3 of us from last Christmas, a picture that now made my stomach turn. One in Marcus's room, positioned to have a clear view of his bed. And one in the kitchen, where they seemed to have a lot of their whispered conversations. I tested each one remotely, making sure the angles were right, the quality was clear, and they were completely invisible from normal viewing positions. Then I went to work and waited. I didn't have to wait long. The first footage came that very afternoon. I was in a meeting with our product team when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the living room camera. I excused myself, ducked into a bathroom stall, and opened the app. What I saw nearly made me drop my phone. Sarah was on our couch, the couch I'd bought for us, where we'd spent countless nights watching movies and planning our future, and she was kissing Marcus with a passion I hadn't seen from her in months. His hands were in her hair, hers were pulling at his shirt, and there was an intimacy in their movements that spoke of practice, of routine, of something that had been going on for much longer than I had imagined. I watched, transfixed and horrified, as they broke apart just long enough for Marcus to pull his shirt over his head before Sarah's hands were on his chest, her mouth on his neck. When they started moving toward the stairs, toward our bedroom, I closed the app. I couldn't watch anymore. Not yet. But I knew I would have to eventually. Because this wasn't just about catching them anymore. This was about making sure that when I revealed their betrayal, there would be no room for excuses, no way to minimize or explain away what they'd done. That evening, they both acted completely normal. Sarah asked about my day, kissed my cheek when I walked in the door, complained about her professors and her thesis deadline. Marcus grabbed beers for all of us, suggested we order pizza, made jokes about the basketball game on TV. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, not even looking at each other, and I marveled at their ability to compartmentalize. How long had they been doing this? How many times had I come home to their casual conversation and easy smiles, never knowing that hours earlier they'd been in my bed together? The thought made me want to scream. Instead, I smiled and nodded and played along with their charade, because I was planning something much worse than screaming. Over the next 2 weeks, I collected enough footage to fill a small hard drive. Not all of it was sexual. In some ways, the intimate conversations were harder to watch than the physical betrayal. I saw them planning when to meet, laughing about close calls, discussing their future together. I heard Sarah tell Marcus that she was going to break up with me after graduation, that she just needed to get through her thesis defense first. I watched Marcus nod and say he'd been patient this long. He could wait a few more weeks. Patient. like I was some inconvenient obstacle they had to work around. The final straw came on a Tuesday night in late April. I was working late, pushing to meet a deadline for a major client demo, when I got multiple motion alerts from the house. I opened the app expecting to see more of the same, but this was different. They were in our kitchen, cooking dinner together. Sarah was wearing my favorite dress, the blue one I'd bought her for her birthday last year. Marcus had his arms around her from behind as she stirred something on the stove, and they were swaying slightly, like they were dancing to music only they could hear. It was so domestic, so couple-like, that for a moment I forgot they were the ones betraying me. They looked happy. They looked like they were in love. And maybe they were. Maybe what I was seeing wasn't just lust or convenience, but actual feelings. Maybe while I'd been working 12-hour days to pay the mortgage on our house, coming home exhausted and distracted, they'd been falling in love right under my nose. The thought should have made me sad. Instead, it made me furious. If they loved each other, they should have had the decency to end things with me first. They should have been honest, given me the chance to walk away with some dignity intact. Instead, they'd chosen to lie, to sneak around, to make me a fool in my own home. They'd made their choice. Now I was going to make mine. Sarah's birthday was coming up on May 15th, and we'd been planning a party for weeks. Nothing huge, just 30 or 40 of our closest friends, some people from work, classmates from her graduate program, Marcus's colleagues. We'd rented the community center in our neighborhood, the same place where we'd had our housewarming party 2 years ago. It was going to be perfect. I threw myself into the planning with an enthusiasm that surprised both of them. I handled the catering, booked the venue, sent out invitations, even arranged for a professional DJ. When Sarah asked why I was going all out, I told her she deserved something special for finishing her master's degree. When Marcus offered to help with costs, I waved him off, said it was my treat. They thought I was being the perfect boyfriend. In reality, I was setting the stage for their perfect humiliation. The technical side was more complicated than I'd expected. I needed to create a video compilation from the footage I'd collected, something that would tell the complete story of their betrayal without being so explicit that it would get me arrested for distributing pornography. I needed it to be devastating but not illegal, shocking but not criminal. I spent my evenings over the next 2 weeks learning video editing software. I'd always been good with technology, but this was different. I was essentially creating a documentary, complete with timestamps, multiple camera angles, and a narrative arc that would leave no doubt about what had been happening. The final video was 23 minutes long. It started with footage of the three of us from happier times, clips from my phone of us laughing together, photos from trips and celebrations, moments that showcased what I thought we'd had. Then it shifted to the security camera footage, showing Marcus arriving at our house while I was at work, Sarah letting him in, the two of them leaving together. The middle section was the most damning. I'd carefully edited together scenes of their relationship, chronologically arranged to show the progression from what looked like an initial attraction to full-blown affair. I'd included some of the audio of their conversations, the planning, the promises, the casual dismissal of my feelings. I'd been careful to blur out anything explicitly sexual, but the emotional betrayal was crystal clear. The ending was the kitchen scene, the two of them cooking together, dancing together, playing house in the home I paid for while I worked late to support us. I'd overlaid it with audio from a conversation where Sarah told Marcus she loved him, that she'd never felt this way about anyone before. Watching the finished product, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and revulsion. It was devastating. It was undeniable. And it was going to destroy them both. But I wasn't done yet. I also created individual packages for both of them. Shorter videos that focus specifically on their betrayals, along with printed screenshots and a detailed timeline of their affair. These would be their personal copies, something they could keep to remember exactly how they'd chosen to end our relationships. The guest list for the party was crucial. I needed everyone who mattered to both of them to be there. Sarah's family, her parents, her sister, her close cousins, her graduate school classmates, especially the ones in her thesis committee who would influence her academic future. Marcus's colleagues from work, including his boss and the clients he'd been trying to impress. Our mutual friends from college, people who'd been part of our social circle for years. I sent personal follow-ups to make sure everyone was coming. I told Sarah's parents I had a special surprise planned for their daughter. I told Marcus's boss that Marcus had been asking about opportunities for advancement, and this might be a good chance to see him in a social setting. I told our friends that this was going to be a night to remember. I wasn't lying about any of it. 3 days before the party, I made the final preparations. I tested all the AV equipment at the community center, making sure the large screen and sound system were working perfectly. I uploaded the video to multiple cloud storage accounts, created backup copies on several devices. I even prepared printed programs, like you'd get at a wedding or graduation, with a timeline of David and Sarah's relationship that guests could follow along with. The night before the party, as Sarah fussed over her outfit and Marcus helped me load decorations into my car, I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger was still there, cold and sharp, but it was controlled now. Focused. "You seem relaxed," Sarah said, giving me a kiss on the cheek. "I thought you'd be more stressed about tomorrow." "Everything's under control," I told her. "Tomorrow's going to be perfect." Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. "You've really outdone yourself, man. Sarah's lucky to have you." The irony was so thick I almost choked on it. But I just smiled and nodded. "We'll see about that," I said. The community center looked amazing. I'd arrived early to set everything up: balloons, streamers, a beautiful banner that read, "Happy Birthday, Sarah," in her favorite colors. The catering was perfect, the bar was stocked, the DJ had all the music Sarah loved. If you didn't know what was coming, you'd think it was going to be a wonderful celebration. Guests started arriving around 7. Sarah looked stunning in a new dress I hadn't seen before. Something Marcus had probably bought her, I realized with a bitter smile. She was glowing with happiness, playing the perfect birthday girl, accepting hugs and gifts and compliments about how great she looked. Marcus worked the room like the salesman he was, shaking hands, making jokes, being his charming self. Several times I caught him and Sarah exchanging glances across the room. Little smiles, subtle nods, the kind of intimate communication that couples develop over time. By 8:30, almost everyone was there. Sarah's parents had driven in from Houston and were beaming with pride over their daughter's academic achievements. Marcus's boss was deep in conversation with him about a potential promotion. Our friends were laughing and drinking and having the kind of good time that makes you remember why you like having parties. At 9 o'clock, I asked the DJ to get everyone's attention. "Hi everyone," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight to celebrate Sarah's birthday and her amazing accomplishment of finishing her master's degree." Applause filled the room. Sarah beamed, blowing me a kiss from across the room where she stood with her parents. "Sarah and I have been together for 3 years," I continued. "And they've been the happiest years of my life. She's smart, beautiful, funny, and I've learned so much about love and trust and partnership from being with her." More applause. I saw Sarah's mother wipe away a tear, clearly thinking this was leading to a proposal. I also want to thank my best friend Marcus, who's been living with us and has become like family to both Sarah and me. The three of us have this amazing bond, this trust, this intimacy that I thought was really special. Marcus raised his beer in a toast, grinning broadly. He had no idea what was coming. In fact, Sarah and Marcus have become so close over the past few months that I thought tonight would be the perfect time to share that relationship with all of you. I nodded to the DJ, who dimmed the lights and started the video. The room fell silent as the opening images appeared on the large screen. Photos of the three of us together, smiling and happy. There were a few ahs from the crowd, people thinking they were about to see some sort of sweet tribute video. Then the security camera footage started playing. I watched the room as comprehension dawned. The first few clips were relatively innocent. Marcus arriving at our house, Sarah letting him in. But the timestamps were clear, and people started doing the math. These were times when I was at work, when Sarah was supposed to be at school, when Marcus claimed to be with clients. Sarah's face went white. Marcus started pushing through the crowd toward me, but it was too late. The video was playing, and it was undeniable. The audio started. Marcus and Sarah planning their meetings, discussing how to avoid getting caught, laughing about how oblivious I was. Sarah's mother gasped audibly. Marcus's boss pulled out his phone, probably checking emails to see if Marcus had really been where he claimed to be during those times. "Turn it off," Marcus shouted, reaching for the AV controls. But I'd locked them down, and the DJ, who I'd paid very well and briefed very thoroughly, kept the video rolling. Now we were into the heart of the betrayal. The intimate conversations, the passionate kisses, the casual way they moved around my house like it was their own. I heard someone in the crowd say, "Is that Sarah? Is that Marcus?" As if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Sarah was crying now, pushing toward the exit, but her path was blocked by friends and family who were staring at the screen in shock. Her father's face was stone, her mother was openly weeping, and her sister was looking back and forth between the video and Sarah like she was trying to solve a puzzle. The kitchen scene played, the two of them cooking together, dancing, looking like a couple in love, as the audio played Sarah telling Marcus she'd never felt this way about anyone before. That's when Sarah finally made it to me. "David, please," she said, grabbing my arm. "Please turn it off. We can explain." "Explain what?" I said calmly, speaking into the microphone so everyone could hear. "That you've been fucking my best friend in my bed while I was at work paying for your education? What exactly needs explaining?" The room erupted. People were shouting, some at me, some at Sarah and Marcus. Someone was calling for the police, though I wasn't sure what crime they thought had been committed. Marcus was screaming at me, calling me a sick fuck, saying I had no right to humiliate them like this. I had no right. I repeated, still speaking into the microphone. I had no right to show people who you really are. To let your family and friends and colleagues see the kind of people they're supporting. The video was ending now, returning to more photos of our happier times, but now with a bitter irony that wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The final image was a picture of the three of us at last Christmas, with text overlaid reading, "Some gifts keep on giving." When the screen went black, the room was dead silent except for Sarah sobbing. "There are printed timelines and screenshots at the back table," I announced, "for anyone who'd like to review the evidence more carefully. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for finally seeing Sarah and Marcus for who they really are." I handed the microphone back to the DJ and walked out. I didn't go home that night. I'd planned for this. I'd booked a hotel room across town and had a bag packed in my car. I needed time to decompress, to process what I'd just done, to prepare for whatever came next. My phone started buzzing immediately. Calls from Sarah, from Marcus, from friends, from Sarah's parents. I turned it off and poured myself a drink from the minibar. What I'd done was brutal. I knew that. I'd humiliated two people I'd once loved in front of everyone they cared about. I'd destroyed relationships, damaged reputations, and probably ended careers. The rational part of my brain was already starting to feel guilty about the collateral damage. But the deeper part of me, the part that had been betrayed and lied to and made a fool of for months, felt satisfied in a way I hadn't expected. They'd gotten exactly what they deserved. They'd chosen to betray my trust, and now they got to live with the consequences. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. The next morning, I finally turned my phone back on. 47 missed calls, hundreds of text messages, dozens of voicemails. I scrolled through some of them. "Sarah. David, please call me. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. Please. Marcus. You fucking psychopath. You destroyed us. I hope you're happy. Sarah's sister. What you did was cruel and wrong, but what she did to you was worse. I'm sorry. My college friend Jake. Holy shit, dude. I can't believe they did that to you. Are you okay? Sarah's mother. I don't know what to say to you. I'm ashamed of my daughter, but I'm frightened by what you did. Marcus's boss. David, I need to speak with you about Marcus's employment. Please call me. I called Jake first. He filled me in on what had happened after I left. Sarah had collapsed, literally fallen to her knees sobbing, while her family stood around looking horrified and embarrassed. Marcus had gotten into a screaming match with several people, including his boss, before storming out. Most of the guests had left within 20 minutes, taking their printed timeline souvenirs with them. It was brutal, man, Jake said. Like, absolutely devastating. But also, I mean, what they did to you was fucked up. I don't know if I could have handled it as well as you did. As well as I did. You didn't hit anyone, you didn't break anything, you just showed people the truth. It was cold as hell, but it was just the truth. That afternoon, I went home to collect some things and found Marcus loading his stuff into his truck. He didn't look at me when I pulled into the driveway, just kept throwing boxes and garbage bags into the back of his pickup. Moving out? I asked casually. He turned around, and I was startled by how terrible he looked. His eyes were red, his face was puffy, and he looked like he hadn't slept at all. You destroyed my life, he said quietly. My job, my reputation, my family. My mom saw the fucking video, David. My mother. You destroyed my life first, I replied. The only difference is you tried to do it in secret, like a coward. I just made sure everyone could see what kind of person you really are. We were going to tell you, he said. After Sarah graduated, we were going to sit you down and... And what? Thank me for providing the house where you could fall in love? Thank me for working my ass off to support her while you fucked her in my bed. He flinched like I'd hit him. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. No, you're right. It was supposed to happen with you both getting away with it, and me looking like the pathetic fool who never saw it coming. Sorry I didn't cooperate with your plan. He finished loading his truck in silence. As he was getting ready to drive away, he turned back to me. You know what the worst part is, he said. I actually felt guilty about it. Every single day, I felt terrible about what we were doing to you. But now I'm glad we did it. Because anyone capable of what you did last night doesn't deserve loyalty or friendship or love. You're a monster, David. I watched him drive away and I felt nothing. No regret, no satisfaction, no anger. Just emptiness. Sarah was gone too, of course. I found a note on the kitchen counter saying she'd taken only her essential things and would send someone for the rest later. She apologized again, said she knew she didn't deserve forgiveness, but asked me to take down any videos I might have posted online. I hadn't posted anything online. The humiliation at the party had been sufficient for my purposes. But I didn't write back to tell her that. Let her wonder. Let her worry about it for a while. Over the next few weeks, I learned about the full scope of what my revenge had accomplished. Sarah had to defer her thesis defense. Apparently, several of her committee members had been at the party or had heard about the video from colleagues, and the department was concerned about the disruption to the academic environment. Her parents had cut off financial support, and without their help and my financial contribution, she couldn't afford to finish her degree. She'd moved back to Houston and taken a job as a receptionist at a dental office. Marcus had been fired 3 days after the party. His boss told me over drinks that the video had revealed Marcus had been lying about his whereabouts during several important client meetings, and they couldn't have a salesperson they couldn't trust. Word had gotten around the industry quickly. Apparently, someone at the party had posted clips of the video on social media, and it had gone viral in our local business community. Marcus was having trouble finding new employment. Several of our mutual friends had chosen sides, and I was surprised to find that most of them had chosen mine. The general consensus seemed to be that while my method had been extreme, Sarah and Marcus had betrayed not just me but the entire friend group by lying to everyone for months. My parents, who lived in California, called after hearing about everything from my sister. We always liked Sarah, my mother said, but what she did was unforgivable. You didn't deserve that. What I did was pretty extreme too, Mom. You showed people the truth, my father chimed in from the extension. Maybe it wasn't the kindest way to do it, but they made their choices. You just made sure there were consequences. But not everyone saw it that way. I received a letter from Sarah's father, a long handwritten note that accused me of being vindictive and cruel, of destroying his daughter's life and future over what he called a mistake in judgment. He said that while he didn't condone Sarah's actions, what I'd done was disproportionate and deliberately harmful, and that he was consulting with lawyers about possible legal action. I forwarded the letter to my own lawyer, who assured me that everything I'd done was legal. The cameras had been in my own home, the footage was of events that actually happened, and I hadn't distributed anything online or sold it for profit. Humiliating someone at a private party with evidence of their actual behavior wasn't a crime, even if it was morally questionable. The legal threats never materialized, but the moral questions lingered. 3 months later, I was still living alone in the house that had once been our happy home. I'd gotten a promotion at work, partly because I was working even more hours than before, throwing myself into coding projects to avoid thinking about everything else. Financially, I was better off than I'd been in years without Sarah's expenses and Marcus's inconsistent utility payments. But emotionally, I was struggling. The satisfaction I'd felt immediately after the party had faded, replaced by a complicated mixture of regret, loneliness, and doubt. I'd accomplished what I set out to do. I'd exposed their betrayal and made sure there were consequences for their actions. But in the process, I'd also revealed something about myself that I wasn't entirely comfortable with. I'd discovered I was capable of calculated cruelty. I could plan someone's humiliation methodically, execute it flawlessly, and sleep soundly afterward. That realization was almost as disturbing as discovering the affair had been. My therapist, yes, I'd started seeing one, called it justified anger with disproportionate expression. She helped me understand that my feelings of betrayal were completely valid, but that my method of addressing them had been designed not just to reveal the truth, but to cause maximum damage to people I'd once cared about. You wanted them to feel the way you felt, she said during one session. Humiliated, powerless, betrayed. And you succeeded. The question is, do you feel better now that you have? The honest answer was complicated. Part of me did feel better. There was something deeply satisfying about knowing that Sarah and Marcus were facing real consequences for their actions, that they couldn't just walk away from our relationship and start fresh without any accountability for the pain they'd caused. But there was also a part of me that mourned the person I'd been before all this happened. The trusting, optimistic guy who believed the best about people, who would never have conceived of such an elaborate revenge plot. That David felt like a stranger to me now. I started getting updates about Sarah and Marcus through mutual friends, even though I tried not to ask. Sarah had indeed moved back in with her parents and was working at the dental office, but she was also slowly rebuilding her life. She'd started seeing a therapist too, had enrolled in some night classes to potentially change career directions, and was apparently doing volunteer work with literacy programs. Marcus had eventually found a new job, though it was with a much smaller company and significantly less pay than he'd been making before. He'd also moved back to his hometown about 2 hours away. According to Jake, he'd been going to therapy and had joined some kind of support group. They're both trying to make amends, Jake told me over beers one evening. Not to you specifically, but like general amends. Sarah's been reaching out to mutual friends to apologize for lying to them. Marcus called his old boss to apologize for the client meetings he'd lied about, even though it won't get his job back. Good for them, I said, and I was surprised to realize I meant it. Have you thought about reaching out? Not to get back together or anything, but just closure. I had thought about it. Late at night, when the house felt too quiet and the weight of what I'd done felt too heavy, I'd considered writing letters to both of them, apologizing not for exposing their affair, but for the way I'd chosen to do it, acknowledging that while their betrayal had hurt me deeply, my response had been designed to hurt them even more. But I never wrote those letters. Some part of me was still too angry, still too hurt, and another part was afraid that apologizing would somehow diminish the justice of what they'd experienced. They had betrayed my trust in the most intimate way possible. Shouldn't there be consequences for that? Shouldn't people who lie and cheat and deceive the people who love them face some kind of reckoning? 6 months after the party, I ran into Sarah at a coffee shop downtown. I was there for a work meeting that had been moved to a more casual setting, and she was sitting alone at a corner table with a laptop and a stack of textbooks. She looked different, thinner, more tired, but also somehow more serious. The easy confidence she'd always carried was gone, replaced by something more cautious, more aware. Our eyes met across the crowded shop, and for a moment neither of us moved. Then she closed her laptop and walked over to my table. "David," she said quietly. "Hi." "Sarah." I gestured to the empty chair across from me. "Do you want to sit?" She hesitated, then sat down. We looked at each other in silence for a long moment. You look good, she said finally. Successful. Thanks. You look. I paused, trying to find the right words. You look like you're working hard. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's one way to put it. I'm taking classes to become a paralegal. Turns out having your academic reputation destroyed makes graduate school difficult. The bitterness in her voice was new. The old Sarah had been optimistic, always looking for the bright side of any situation. This version was harder, more guarded. I'm sorry about your thesis, I said, and I realized I meant it. I know how much that degree meant to you. She studied my face like she was trying to determine if I was being sincere. Are you? Sorry, I mean. It was a fair question, and it deserved an honest answer. I'm sorry about the collateral damage. I'm sorry that your academic career got caught up in our personal drama. But I'm not sorry that people found out what you did. She nodded slowly. That's fair, I guess. What you showed them. It was all true. Every bit of it. I know. I keep thinking about that, she said. About how you must have felt watching those videos, editing them together. I can't imagine how much that must have hurt. It did hurt, I admitted. But you know what hurt more. Coming home every day to you and Marcus pretending everything was normal. Kissing you goodnight while you were planning when you could see him next. That hurt worse than anything I saw on those cameras. She was quiet for a long time, staring down at her hands. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. I know this doesn't mean anything now, she said. But I need you to know that I never meant for it to happen. Marcus and I. It started as just talking. I was stressed about school, you were working all the time, and he was just there. And then one day it became something else, and by the time I realized how far it had gone, I didn't know how to stop it. You could have told me. I could have. I should have. But I was a coward. I was afraid of losing everything. You, the house, my financial stability, my whole life. So I kept telling myself I could have both, that I could figure out a way to make it work without anyone getting hurt. That was never going to work, Sarah. I know that now. I knew it then, too, if I'm being honest. I just didn't want to face it. We sat in silence again. The coffee shop buzzed with activity around us. Students studying, business people having meetings, friends catching up. But our corner felt separate from all of it, like we were in our own bubble of complicated history. What you did at the party, she said eventually. It was cruel. Effective, but cruel. I know. My parents haven't spoken to me in 4 months. My sister barely returns my calls. Some of my oldest friends won't even acknowledge me when they see me on the street. I'm sorry about that. Are you, though? Because it feels like that was the point. Not just to expose what Marcus and I did, but to make sure we lost everything because of it. She was right, and we both knew it. I had wanted them to suffer. I'd wanted them to understand what betrayal felt like, what it was like to have your life turned upside down by people you trusted. I'd wanted consequences that matched the magnitude of what they'd done to me. Maybe it was, I said finally. Maybe I did want you to lose everything, the way I felt like I'd lost everything when I found out about the affair. And do you feel better now that we have? It was the same question my therapist had asked, and I still didn't have a clear answer. Sometimes I think you got exactly what you deserved, and I sleep fine at night. Other times I think I became someone I don't recognize, someone capable of calculating how to hurt people as efficiently as possible. Sarah nodded like she understood. For what it's worth, I think we all became people we didn't recognize. I became someone who could lie to the person I loved every single day for months. Marcus became someone who could betray his best friend. And you became someone who could orchestrate that level of public humiliation. None of us were our best selves. No, I agreed. We weren't. She stood up, gathering her things. I should go. I have a class in an hour. Sarah, I said as she turned to leave. For what it's worth, I hope the paralegal thing works out for you. I hope you find a way to rebuild. She paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Thank you. And David, I hope you find a way to forgive yourself for what you did. Not for my sake, but for yours. Carrying that much anger. It'll eat you alive eventually. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, thinking about what she'd said. She was right about the anger. I could feel it sometimes like a weight in my chest, a constant low-level rage that colored how I saw the world. I'd gotten my revenge, but I hadn't gotten peace. That conversation with Sarah was a turning point, though not in the way I'd expected. Instead of providing closure, it opened up new questions about forgiveness, justice, and what it really means to move forward from betrayal. I started working more seriously with my therapist on processing not just what had been done to me, but what I had done in response. We talked about the difference between accountability and revenge, between natural consequences and calculated punishment. You had every right to end your relationship with Sarah and your friendship with Marcus, she told me. You had every right to tell your mutual friends what had happened, to seek support, even to take legal action regarding your living situation. But what you did went beyond protecting yourself or seeking justice. It was designed to destroy them. They destroyed me first. Did they, though? They hurt you, deeply and inexcusably. They betrayed your trust and damaged your ability to believe in the people you love. But did they actually destroy you? It was a hard question to answer. In many ways, I was better off than I'd been before. I was financially stable, professionally successful, and finally free from a relationship that had apparently been built on lies. The person who'd been destroyed was the trusting, optimistic version of myself, but maybe that person had been naive to begin with. Over the following months, I started making different choices. I reached out to friends I'd been neglecting, started dating again, cautiously, and began looking for ways to channel my energy into something positive rather than dwelling on past hurts. I also started volunteering with a local nonprofit that provided technology training to people re-entering the workforce after personal setbacks, divorce, bankruptcy, criminal records, addiction recovery. It felt good to use my skills to help people rebuild their lives rather than tear them down. One evening, about a year after the party, I was helping a client set up a LinkedIn profile when she asked me what had motivated me to volunteer. I guess I learned that it's easier to destroy things than to build them, I told her. And I wanted to get better at building. 2 years after the party that ended my old life, I was in a completely different place. I'd been promoted to a senior developer position, had moved to a smaller house that felt more like home than the place I'd shared with Sarah and Marcus ever had, and was in a healthy relationship with Emma, a teacher I'd met through the volunteer program. Emma knew the whole story. I'd learned that starting a relationship with secrets was a recipe for disaster, and she'd helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't just personal betrayal but trauma. The way I'd responded had been a trauma response, an attempt to regain control and power in a situation where I'd felt completely powerless. That doesn't excuse what you did, she'd said when I first told her about the video. But it helps explain it. You were hurt, and you lashed out in the most effective way you could think of. Do you think I'm a terrible person? I think you're a person who did something terrible when you were in terrible pain. There's a difference. That distinction mattered more than I'd expected. I was learning to separate my actions from my identity, to acknowledge that I'd been capable of calculated cruelty without defining myself entirely by that capability. I was also learning about forgiveness, not the kind where you pretend nothing happened, but the kind where you stop carrying the anger around like a weapon you might need someday. I still thought about Sarah and Marcus sometimes, wondered how they were doing, whether they'd found happiness together or if the guilt and drama had eventually torn them apart too. I'd heard through mutual friends that they'd both moved away from Austin, starting fresh in cities where their story wasn't common knowledge. Part of me hoped they were doing well. Not because I'd forgiven them. Forgiveness felt too generous. But because I'd realized that their continued suffering didn't actually make me feel any better. Revenge, I'd learned, was like a sugar high. Intense and satisfying in the moment, but ultimately leaving you emptier than before. The real work wasn't making them pay for what they'd done. The real work was figuring out how to trust people again, how to love without the constant fear of being made a fool, how to build a life that wasn't defined by what others had taken from me. If I could go back and do it all over again, would I change what I did that night at the party? The question haunts me sometimes, Usually late at night when Emma is asleep beside me and I'm staring at the ceiling, thinking about the person I used to be. The honest answer is, I don't know. I still believe Sarah and Marcus deserved consequences for their betrayal. I still think there's something important about truth, about not letting people get away with devastating others through lies and deception. The part of me that planned and executed their public humiliation wasn't entirely wrong about the injustice of what they'd done. But I also know now that there were other ways to handle it. I could have confronted them privately, ended the relationships cleanly, sought support from friends and family without turning their betrayal into entertainment. I could have protected myself and sought accountability without orchestrating their destruction. The video, the party, the calculated revelation in front of everyone they cared about. That wasn't about justice. That was about making them feel as powerless and humiliated as they'd made me feel. It was about evening the score in the cruelest way possible. Did it work? In some ways, yes. They faced real consequences for their actions. Their families, friends, and colleagues saw them clearly, without the masks they'd been wearing. The comfortable lie they'd been living was shattered as completely as they'd shattered my trust. But revenge is a hollow victory. It doesn't heal the wounds or restore what was lost. It doesn't bring back innocence or rebuild trust. All it does is ensure that the damage spreads, that more people get hurt, that the cycle of pain continues. I'm a different person now than I was 3 years ago. Not better or worse necessarily, but different. I'm more cautious about trust, more aware of the capacity for deception that exists in everyone. I'm also more conscious of my own capacity for both love and cruelty, more careful about the choices I make when I'm hurt or angry. Emma says I'm harder now than I probably was before, more guarded and skeptical. But she also says I'm more intentional about kindness, more deliberate about building people up instead of tearing them down. Maybe that's the real lesson of all this. Not that betrayal makes monsters of us, but that we get to choose what we do with the knowledge of our own monstrosity. Sarah was right about one thing in that coffee shop encounter. Carrying around that much anger would have eaten me alive eventually. The revenge felt good in the moment, but it would have poisoned every relationship I tried to have afterward if I'd held onto it. Learning to let go of that anger, not for their sake but for mine, was harder than planning their humiliation had been. But it was also more important. These days, when people ask me about relationships, about trust, about what to do when someone betrays you, I tell them this. Feel the anger, acknowledge the hurt, protect yourself, seek support. But don't let the desire for revenge consume you. Don't become someone you wouldn't want to know in pursuit of justice that won't actually make you whole. The people who hurt you will face consequences for their actions, one way or another. Life has a way of balancing the scales without your intervention. Your job isn't to ensure they suffer. Your job is to heal, to rebuild, to become someone capable of love and trust again, despite what you've learned about human capacity for betrayal. I wish I'd known that 2.5 years ago. I wish I'd been strong enough to walk away with my integrity intact, to let their betrayal speak for itself without amplifying it into a spectacle. But I didn't know then what I know now. And maybe that's okay too. Maybe we're all just doing the best we can with the tools we have at the time, learning as we go, trying to become better versions of ourselves even after, especially after we've discovered what our worst versions are capable of. My name is David Chen, and this is the story of how I learned that revenge is a dish best served never. Some lessons, unfortunately, can only be learned the hard way.